This is Michael Popok, Legal AF. David DePape, the attacker of Paul Pelosi, is being sentenced to 30 years in federal prison for the attempted kidnapping of Nancy Pelosi and the attack on a family member, her husband, Paul, 81 years old, who was hit repeatedly in the head with a hammer in the unprecedented attack, first time in our nation's history, that a public official's home was broken into in a home invasion, leading to the attempted kidnapping and the injury. There's actually 2 charges against DePape. One, he was sentenced for the attempted kidnapping to 20 years, and for the assault on a family member of a public official, he was sentenced to 30 years. Those will be served concurrently, meaning he'll be in for 30 years in total and being given credit for the 18 months that he's been held in pretrial detention. The Judge Jacqueline Corley, said that this was an unprecedented event, the actual break-in, and that she didn't buy any of the attempts at showing remorse by DePape. There was a statement that was read out loud by the Pelosi family in which they noted the continued recovery of Paul Pelosi, not out of the woods yet, not after having been hit in the head with a hammer twice, having his skull fractured at his advanced age. On the sentencing, just to give you a little bit of a view here, this was on the federal crimes. David DePape, 44 years old, originally from Canada, is also the subject of state prosecutions for state crimes related to this same incident. That's what happens. The feds take over, go first, when the federal government has a prevailing interest in federal crimes. In this case, the attempted kidnapping of a public official and family member injury. But the state also has simple assault and battery and felonies related to David DePape's attack on the same Paul Pelosi and the victim. That trial has not happened yet. It's likely that David DePape will take a plea, he having already gone through the jury system and learned that juries are not buying what he's selling in terms of a defense. He should cut a plea deal. That state court case, whether it's tried, meaning he has to come out of federal court to sit in a state trial in the next 6 months, or he takes a plea deal, that sentencing will be added on to after DePape is done with his federal incarceration, meaning David DePape will never in his natural life see freedom again, nor should he for what he has done. He'll serve his 30 years in federal case, and then he'll be sentenced to, 10, 15, or 20 more years in California state case. At the age of 44, he'll be 94 or 100 before he's even up for probation or up for parole. Now, you may have already heard, I did a hot take on this, that the original amount of time that the government, having gone through the pretrial sentencing guidelines, came up with for the proper sentence for David DePape was actually 40 years, 40. The defense argued for 14, and the judge sided more with the prosecutors in finding 30 years. Now, some people might be saying, well, how did the judge come up with 30? Why wasn't it 40? It could have been up to 50 based on the way the sentencing guidelines work. So let me walk through the sentencing guidelines as a little bit of a teachable moment. This only applies to federal criminal cases. For every crime, federal crime, felony or misdemeanor, there is a federal sentencing guideline formula that is used. You go through every offense or crime is given a base offense level number, all right? And let's say it starts with 10 or 17 or 45. You then add and subtract to that depending upon the existence of aggravating and mitigating factors. Aggregating factors. You used a weapon. You broke into the home. You have perhaps a prior record of criminal activity. In this case, he didn't. But these are all factors, and there's dozens of them that go into aggravating factors that increase the base level score. That's an upward departure. Then there are things that can be used to mitigate and lower the number. Those are generally argued for by the defense. And it was cooperation credit. He cooperated but there's nothing to cooperate here because this was a one-man lone wolf job. So there would be no cooperation credit. Then you total up the number. If there's money involved, the amount of the money can also be an aggravating or mitigating factor. And then you total it up, and that number let's say it's 40 or 50 or 80 or 100. You then look on the pretrial sentencing chart for that particular number, and it tells you the recommended number of months that that person should serve in prison. And that's how the government came up with 40 years in prison as a recommendation. The defense did some other legerdemain magic trick to try to cut everything down to 14 years, and the judge wasn't buying it. So we've talked about the federal sentencing, the state court criminal proceeding that has not yet been started nor concluded, and certainly hasn't been sentenced. The fact that that'll be tacked on to the back end after he's done. He'll be brought out of federal prison to attend his state proceeding. And then I want to talk about, just to remind everybody, what was this case even about? David DePape with Ziploc ties, plastic ties to bind arms, a hammer that he found in the house, and a unicorn costume. I'm not making this up. Broke into the house looking for Nancy Pelosi, screaming out, "Where's Nancy? Where's Nancy?" Very much like the January 6th attackers and insurrectionists who he was emulating and who he admired, who went through the halls of Congress looking for Nancy Pelosi, saying, "Where's Nancy?" This guy did the same thing. "Where's Nancy? Where's Nancy?" He hadn't figured out that Nancy Pelosi was still in Washington. And the only one home, unfortunately, unfortunately for the family, was Paul Pelosi, alone by himself in his underwear. When he answered the door in the middle of the night, because the guy's banging on the door, he's confronted by David DePape. The police come. Paul Pelosi had the presence of mind to be able to communicate with the police and get them there, almost talking in code. They sent the police. It was a number of minutes later. It wasn't immediately. They couldn't figure out that this was Nancy Pelosi's house in San Francisco, and they didn't dispatch a team fast enough. By the time they got there, David DePape was already in the house, confronting face-to-face with Paul Pelosi, pulled out his a weapon. I believe he found in the house a hammer, and in full presence of the police, hammered Paul Pelosi in the head. His plan that he told the police later was to put on the unicorn costume. Again, I'm not making this up. Sit and interview. This sounds like the Kings of Comedy, but it's not, by Martin Scorsese. Go look it up. He's going to tie his guest up and interview him. He's going to interview Nancy Pelosi and have her admit to committing, treason and other acts against the American people, while he's wearing a unicorn costume that has some sort of GoPro in its head, while he live streams it on Facebook. For the third time, I will tell you, I am not embellishing what happened here. That's the David DePape. Now, his lawyers argued at trial, of course the jury didn't buy it, that he so fell down the rabbit hole of the internet and the dark web and became sort of triggered and activated. This sleeper cell of crazy got activated by being, on the web so long. But the jury wasn't buying it. He's responsible. He wasn't insane. He wasn't out of his mind. And now he's going to jail for what is going to be, to do the math at home again, is going to be 30 years less 18 months already served. Plus, when he comes out, he goes right into serving his sentence for the state criminal acts and crimes that he committed. We have to talk about things like this. I did a hot take on this very thing about a week ago when the government recommended 40 weeks, and I said 40 years, and I wanted to remind people that MAGA, right-wing, Tucker Carlson and others sent around a vicious and disgusting and inhumane rumor to dehumanize this and to victimize the victim, Paul and Nancy Pelosi, again, claiming that the reason that Paul Pelosi was in his underwear at 81 years old, answering the door in the middle of the night, is because he had a gay prostitute or boyfriend coming to the house. And that traveled around the world for several days, distracting attention from the vicious attack and the unprecedented break-in to the house of an elected official. I don't think any of those people, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Gosar, Briggs, Gates, right-wing MAGA media, would want David DePape in the middle of their vestibule or their front door, broken into their apartment with a hammer he found in their apartment facing them, would they? With Ziploc ties and a unicorn costume. But that's what we have to deal with on the other side of the aisle. That is something that the Elected officials in the media, no matter the political stripe, should have been in complete alliance and allied with the victim, Paul Pelosi, and said, this is a tragedy. This shouldn't have happened. What kind of world are we coming to? We don't want any of our elected officials, no matter their political leaning, to be subject to this kind of break-in or attack, and certainly not their family members. But that's not where the MAGA Republicans and the media went. And we got to report on it here because we don't blow smoke or sunshine on the MeidasTouch Network. If you like what I'm doing, you can follow me on Wednesdays and Saturdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on a show we call Legal AF. After stories like this in The Unicorn, you know why. We curate the best 4 or 5 stories at the intersection of law and politics, and we bring it to you right here on the MeidasTouch Network and then on audio podcast platforms of your choice. Leave me a thumbs up and a comment here. It helps keep me on the air. You can see I'm on the road. I don't want people to think that I'm recording somewhere very strange. I am. It's a hotel. I'm traveling. So until my next hot take, until my next Legal AF, this is Michael Popok reporting. Heary, heary, Legal AF Law Breakdown is now in session. Go beyond the headlines and get a deep dive into the important legal concepts you need to know, and we discuss every day on Legal AF. Exclusive content you won't find anywhere else, all for the price of a couple of cups of coffee. Join us at patreon.com/legalaf. That's patreon.com/legalaf.